Us now is Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He's the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's an unbelievable state of affairs, but first, your reaction to Donald Trump on that call. Do you think a crime is worth investigating there?
You can't make this stuff up. It's outrageous. I'll leave the lawyers to make the decision what kind of legal jeopardy Trump may be in. I will say this, from the Senate Intelligence Committee perspective, our bipartisan report about not only what happened in 2016 with Russian intervention, but we said going forward, American officials should be very careful about questioning the legitimacy of our election because it plays directly into the narrative of Vladimir Putin. And unfortunately, Trump and his enablers seem to be doing that bidding one more time.
I mean, that's so interesting. And as someone who looked more closely at the Russia question in 2016 than just about anyone on earth, what do you think about the fact that Donald Trump took what Russia did and what's detailed in your committee's report and in the Mueller report and added his audacity, his shamelessness? And if you listen to the call, you have to add stupidity to the conduct. And we now have at least 12 senators who plan to question the single foundation of our democracy on Wednesday. Did you ever think that Trump would study the Russian attack and improve upon it?
Well, the remarkable thing is, our government did a pretty good job this election cycle about keeping foreign disinformation out of the process. And Americans turned out for the election in record numbers. The system worked. But what we could have never predicted is that the center of disinformation and misinformation was coming from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, where Donald Trump and his enablers were spewing this falsehoods. Thank goodness, in a way, we could say the system held because judges appointed by both parties' presidents, including appointees by Trump, pushed back. Republican elected officials pushed back. Local election officials in all the states that were contested pushed back. But it was still pretty amazing. This guy's audacity, now enabled by, unfortunately, 12 of my colleagues who aren't offering any evidence. They simply want to cheat the American people.
You know, it makes me think hard and re-examine some of our own reporting around impeachment. It was reported that some Republicans said that it clearly was an abuse of power, but there would be an election to decide whether Trump should be reelected. Now they've moved the goalposts once again, and that election isn't good enough. What is the permanent damage of 12 U.S. senators, two of whom had their own names on an election that they now say was so fraudulent they won't go forward with the formality of certifying the Electoral College? What stain does that leave on the country that Joe Biden's going to have to try to govern?
Well, I think it's going to make it harder for Joe Biden. And I can bemoan these senators or their cohorts in the House. I can also point out the fact that there were close to 40 Republicans who I think at the end of the day will stand up for our democratic process. I can point to the fact that even through the midst of, once again, Donald Trump trying to sabotage a COVID relief package, we actually got 92 senators to vote in favor of that relief, not as much as I would like to see go out to the American public, but the system did work. I'm not apologizing or standing up. Matter of fact, I think these 12 senators are trying to cheat the American public from the results of our election and undermine our democracy. But I do think at the end of the day, there are good people of goodwill in both parties. And I think the best attribute that Joe Biden brings to the table at this moment in time is that sense of human empathy, that willingness to try to reach out a hand, to try to work with folks who we may not fully agree with. And I hope and pray that there'll be a lot of us in both parties who will try to get the job done. I don't want to sound Pollyannish, but the alternative and the danger that Trump and his enablers is so great, we can bemoan that, or we can say, how are we going to pick up the pieces both on Wednesday, in the aftermath of Wednesday, but more importantly on January 20th, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get sworn in as the next president and vice president, to make sure we get this country fixed.
You work in and know more about intelligence and how the intelligence community functions and how it's strained under Donald Trump than just about anyone. Devin Nunes is going to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a sign that Donald Trump surely knows he has lost and these efforts are fruitless. He's making fools out of those 12 Republican senators. Just for anyone that isn't an expert in Devin Nunes's misconduct and really abuse of his own office, can you talk about his role in trying to thwart the Russia investigation and aid Donald Trump, the price he paid for this Medal of Freedom, if you will?
Well, I'm not going to comment on a specific colleague. I am going to say the House effort, particularly when it was controlled by Mr. Nunes, put forward nothing of merit, put forward nothing that was factual. Unlike the Senate committee, which was bipartisan, virtually unanimous in each one of our 5 reports that laid out not only what the Russians did, but how we prevent that going forward, how we recognize the threat that social media plays, how our intelligence services need to pick up their game. And the concern I have for our intelligence community, which at the end of the day, their most important job is to speak truth to power. And this president didn't want to hear that truth. And I really respect whether you're talking about CIA, NSA, the FBI in terms of our domestic services. They have kind of hung in, but they have been under brutal assault from an administration that didn't want to hear the truth, and particularly didn't want to hear the truth when it involved Vladimir Putin.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.